Today we will go ahead and kick off our presentation on what the deal is with test optional schools. I'll go ahead and get us started. And then we'll definitely have lots of time for questions at the end. But this is what's on the agenda today. So we're going to talk about what test optional actually means. There are a lot of different interpretations of this out there, so we'll explain how to really think about it, why schools are switching to test optional policies. I'm going to be looking at some of the top schools that are test optional for 2024. And then we're going to talk about what that actually means in terms of how the test scores play a role in your application packet. Explain how schools kind of go through and evaluate applications that may or may not have test scores provided. We'll also talk about how to put together a really strong application, even if you don't have a standardized test score that you want to share. And finally, we'll chat about what the difference is between schools that are test optional and those that are test blind. And we will definitely leave time for questions at the end, but feel free to put those in the chat or in the Q&A section as we go, just so that you don't forget your question, because we definitely don't want that to happen. We'll probably wait until the end to address them, but at least that way we'll have captured everything. All right, excellent. So by way of introduction, my name is Marina. Daryl may join us. It seems like there were a little bit of technical difficulties with this one, so my apologies for that. But I am an admissions counselor here with Quad Foundation Learning, and I am a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania as well as the University of Chicago. I did my undergraduate studies at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania many years ago, but still very memorable. And did a lot of alumni interviews and really enjoyed participating in that part of the process and learning about different students and kind of the new generation of college students at Penn. And then I went back to do my MBA at the University of Chicago at the Booth School of Business. I actually have my 10-year reunion coming up really soon, so looking forward to getting back on campus. And while I was there, I was part of the student admissions committee, so I got to read a lot of applications and kind of understand what that process looks like behind the scenes. And now I support students who are going through the college application process and figuring out what the right path is for them and how to position themselves in the best light and to tell their unique story in a powerful way. So that's a little bit about me. All right, so we'll kick it off with what does test optional really mean? And yeah, it means that the test is optional. It actually really does mean that. And I think there is this desire to say that's a lie, it's not really optional, you have to submit it. They're just telling you it's optional to trick you or something like that. That is not the case. If a school is test optional, it means that if you submit your tests, they'll be reviewed as part of your application, and if you don't submit them, they won't be reviewed. You are not at a disadvantage if you don't submit your test scores to a test optional school. What that school will do instead is make all of the other parts of your application just a little bit more important. So if you think of your application, and this is simplifying it obviously, but if you think of your application and the different pieces of it, like your GPA, your test scores, should you submit them, your class rank, your extracurriculars, your essays, all of those different, your recommendations. If you think of that all as a pie, those are all different pieces of the pie, you're removing one piece of the pie and everything else is taking up that space. All right. So basically that just means that if they're evaluating, for example, your application as 6 different categories, now they're going to look at it as 5. Each of the 5 categories is going to have to be worth a little bit more to kind of take up that space. All right. And, there we go. All right. And then in terms of why we're seeing kind of this evolution and the switch to some test optional policies being more prevalent, there are a number of factors that are driving that. colleges want to make sure first that applicants aren't disadvantaged by low test scores, because there is some research that shows that students who may live in like more affluent areas or have like more affluent families, they tend to score higher on standardized tests, often because they're able to get additional support in the preparation process. And so schools want to make sure that they are not disadvantaging students who don't have access to those kinds of resources. They want to also make sure that they're attracting a diverse body of applicants, and that students who may not test well, but are very successful in school and in other activities, still feel like they have the potential to apply and succeed at these schools. And the pandemic sort of amplified a lot of that, right? With just how different the resources were during the pandemic for students based on like areas they lived in, families, etc. Some of these same things that like generally are the factors driving this change were just really like amplified during the pandemic and made to be more even prevalent. So what we expect to happen is that there will be more test optional schools because they're going to want to provide more applicants with the opportunity to make that decision and kind of evaluate what the best path is for them in their application. And we've seen, this year in particular, some schools that were either test blind or test optional go back to having like mandatory test submissions, but I think that the trend that's expected is that we'll see more with tests being optional. All right, and so we're going to talk about some of the top test optional colleges in 2024. These are amazing schools, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily even realize that they're test optional, but truly like the opportunity here is take a look at these and really feel like, wow, there are a variety of schools that are test optional, test required, test blind. And so that's something that you definitely want to think about in your application process, particularly if the testing piece is something that is maybe like giving you a lot of extra stress or anxiety, or you haven't been able to like find the secret, right? So Dartmouth in Hanover in New Hampshire tries to take a holistic approach to the selection process. And it's, all of these, the next 10 schools that we'll be talking about are excellent schools. It's one of the best schools where you do not have to submit your test scores. It is remaining test optional, and will continue to have a very holistic approach of looking at their students. So they're not going to be focused on tests. They will be looking at the grades, the extracurriculars, the recommendations, the essays. If you submit your test scores, they'll look at them. If you don't, they'll just give more weight to the other things. We've got Brown as well in Rhode Island, which is continuing with its test optional policy. And they are very adamant about their approach of looking at the whole student and not just their ability to take a standardized test. We all kind of know, like, some people are just really good test takers. Some people are really good, people are like really good at internalizing the knowledge that they get in school, but not so great at the testing. And so that's why they're kind of doing this, right? Because everybody has their different skills, and they don't want to necessarily penalize anyone if they're not like a good standardized test taker. It's a very like unique skill, I would say. We also got Columbia in New York City. They became test optional in 2020. Recently announced it would stay permanent. And yes, the presentation, I believe, as well as the recording will be sent afterwards. Andrea, feel free to confirm or deny if that's accurate information. But yeah, with Columbia also, you can take the ACT or the SAT. You don't have to. We'll go next one. You've got Cornell, also New York, also has extended the test optional policy. So we'll see where it goes after fall of 2024. But for now, it has been extended. There are 3 colleges that do not consider test scores. That's the Agriculture and Life Sciences, Architecture, Art and Planning, and the College of Business at Cornell. Those do not actually look at test scores in the admissions process. The other 5 colleges allow students to submit their scores, but it is not a requirement. And the reason that they've kind of extended the test optional policy is to continue to account for some of like the challenges that happen with COVID-19, and they have an experimental period right now where they're kind of figuring out what to do next. But for fall of 2024, which is probably the application period that is of most interest to many of you, still test optional. Emory in Atlanta, Georgia has also extended its test optional policy for first year and transfer students. So I think just like a note of caution, I guess, here for those that are joining who may be a little bit earlier in their high school careers, this is something to continue to just like have an eye and an ear to. These processes may change. There's a lot of discussion about the role of standardized testing and whether the right thing to do is to require, not require, have it optional, not look at all. So we do expect there to be changes over the next couple of years. So definitely something you have to stay in tune with. But for the time being, you do not need to submit your test scores, and you do not need to explain why you are or not submitting them. So what is the role of test scores in those test optional schools? Essentially, like, these schools are trying to get the best students that they can, the best class, like the best combination, the best unique combination, and they're also trying to look at fairness. And there has been some concern that fairness in test optional schools is like at risk, but the reality is that these schools have their evaluation methods really down. They spend a lot of time and invest a lot of resources in making sure that their evaluation processes are as fair as possible and are very consistent, so that there aren't I know, like, at the end of the year when everyone gets their applications and their letters back, sometimes it can feel random, but the reality is that these schools are really looking to craft a class, a unique class, and they're looking to fill different kind of spots in that class and make sure that they have all of the different like skills that they need and the unique talents that they need. But what they found is that they can do this without requiring test scores, and they're able to fairly evaluate students who don't submit them too, because they're just looking at the pie for each student and kind of making an assessment about their ability to succeed in school. So with things like test scores specifically, because those are a reflection of like your academic ability, your ability to study and learn new materials and test well, and whether or not you'll be able to be successful in some of those challenging college level classes, they just basically shift their attention to your GPA, how you've performed in school, maybe your AP exams or other exams, your extracurriculars, how you've been able to grow within those. Your essays will also obviously reflect your academic abilities. Your teachers will provide guidance too on your performance. So they're just looking elsewhere to create a picture of how you would do at that school. So how do you know which to do? This is, probably the thing that once you kind of accept, okay, they're really not going to punish me if I don't submit my scores, how do you decide if you submit them or not? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to look at each of the schools that you are applying to and decide if your test scores look good for that school. So I do actually, and when I work with students, I do typically recommend that they take the test, or at the very least take a practice test and see how they're doing. Like, even a practice test without having any preparation, if they can take a practice test and score like reasonably well without too much prep, then we kind of get the sense, okay, well, if you actually prepared, like, where might you be able to get? And if you do take the test, then and you find that your scores are kind of at the top of the range for the students that are admitted to that school, either at or above the 75th percentile, that's a good sign to you. Your test scores are worth submitting, okay? And another reason you might want to consider submitting your test scores, your SAT or your ACT, is if you need to like counterbalance some of your other scores, potentially maybe like a grade that you weren't super happy with, or maybe you didn't have like the best AP test score or an IB test score that you can submit. There will be some schools, and you have to look at each one kind of individually, that will recommend submitting the scores if you can, even though they're optional. So just you need to kind of be on the lookout for that, but the ones that we've gone through are truly test optional. You don't want to submit your scores if they might be in that like bottom half of the range, so below the 50th percentile of the students that were admitted. All of that information is like relatively easily accessible, so you can see where you fall on the in the range. And if you're below the 50th percentile, you know, really consider either taking it again or not submitting. And if you feel like the other parts of your application are really strong and can speak to your academic potential, then that's another reason that you might choose not to submit test scores. So for example, if you are, you know, top of your class and the top few students in your class and have done really well on your classwork and have taken those hard classes and you have a strong transcript, you've been involved in extracurricular activities and been able to develop there, but you're just, you know, test taking is a challenge for you, you get really nervous or whatever it is, those things can kind of help make up for it, and you don't need to submit the test scores if that's the case. Similarly, if you have other tests that prove that you're able to take those hard college level courses and do well on the testing, that can be another reason not to submit your test scores, particularly if they're kind of like average or below. All right. And so how are test optional applications evaluated? And what are those strategies? So there are a number of things that will be looked at, right? And this is really like the things that you want to think about too as you're putting together your complete application packet. This is really like a very good like exercise in self-reflection as you go through this process and kind of think about, should I take the test? Should I not take the test? I took the test, I have this score, should I submit it or not? You really want to assess like, what do you look like as a candidate? And the things that you'll want to look at are your academic record. Those pieces are going to be your GPA. So how are your grades? What are the courses that you took? Are they super challenging? Are they the most challenging courses that are offered at your school? Or were they kind of like a mix? Where did you land in terms of class rank if your school provides that information? You'll also want to look at extracurriculars. Right? So you'll be looking at how were you involved outside of the classroom in particular? You know, how did you grow in that involvement? What are some of the things that you contributed to whatever extracurricular activity that you did? Not just what you got out of it, but how did you kind of get back to it? Additionally, you'll want to take a look at the specific schools and decide like what is the role of test scores. That will be very clear, and I do encourage you to be calm and confident in the fact that if a school like Julie says it's test optional and on its in its communications it's saying, you know, if you don't submit it, you are not going to be at a disadvantage. Like, trust that it is not trying. No one's trying to trick you. You want to take a look and understand how schools kind of look at scores like your SATs, ACTs, IB, AP tests compared to other application components. And some of that you can do through research on their website and conversations with folks, but it does like vary a little bit from school to school and different programs, right? Like certain programs may be more focused on testing, while others are more like artistic or liberal arts and kind of focused on like writing skills. So you'll want to be aware of like those little differences that might pop up as well. And then there are certainly individual factors, right? So the school is going to be looking at like, What kinds of personal challenges did you encounter? What were your experiences? How did you get through things? Like, they're going to be looking for evidence of like resilience and different things, and they will understand if there is a reason that potentially it did not make sense for you to submit a test score. They're not really, but at the same time, like, they're not going to be thinking about that. They're not going to say, okay, this person did not submit a test score, so I'm going to assume it's bad. That's not how that'll work. It will really just be, I'm going to look at the other elements of their application. And ultimately, you want to see, like, is this going to help me or hurt me? And like we talked about on the last slide, it's going to help you if your test scores are in the top range and you need to kind of show a little extra like academic boost. And it probably could hurt you to submit them if you know, your grades are top notch, you're first in the class, and you have a ton of great leadership experience, but your test scores are you know, very far below average. So that's kind of how to think about it. It's a little bit nuanced, definitely, for each person, but those are some of the starting points. All right. And ultimately, you'll kind of do that pro and con calculation, figure out what works best for you, and highly, highly recommend talk with your school counselor, talk with the college counselor that are available to you if you need to get extra help. This process is constantly changing, and so it's good to like get input from a variety of people as well. Like, if you kind of think about your application and share it with someone else and tell them, okay, these are like the 3 things that I think stand out about me, and this is what I'm concerned about. You kind of get their feel for, okay, is that accurate? Like, does that stand out about you? Do I already get the message that your application packet tells me you're very successful academically? Or is there something that I'm kind of concerned about if I look through it? So it's good to get like a few other pairs of eyes on it. All right. And if you are putting together an application without standardized test scores, thoughts on that, you're going to want to definitely show your academic success. So one of the main reasons why schools are looking at this is because they want to make sure that they're setting you up for success. And if you were really struggling to manage your, you know, college level courses in high school, and testing was really difficult for you, then maybe like a school that is academically like extremely challenging isn't the right fit, right? And so they're going to be looking for that kind of thing. So what you want to do if you are not submitting test scores is to show that you can perform successfully in a college level environment, that you can sort of study independently and figure out your strengths and figure out your weaknesses and get help, etc. So in terms of your GPA, you're going to want to highlight that, and you're going to want to show improvement. So if you started with, you know, like a B in your math courses, and then were able to like get it up to an A- over time, that's really great. Like, what you don't want to show is the opposite of that, right? You don't want to show, okay, I did like great in my freshman level classes, and then as it got harder, things got a little bit more challenging. So definitely stay focused on those academics. Don't give up, you know, your fall semester of senior year. Those grades are still important. Don't even give up the second semester of your senior year, because, you know, if you're waitlisted somewhere, those are things that can be very powerful to show, like, you continue to focus, you continue to improve. You're also going to want to show that you took hard courses, right? So honors level, AP, IB classes, that you know, took a chance on like a hard math class or something like that. It doesn't have to be every single class, but you do want to show that you're not just like shying away from the challenging courses that might be more reflective of like a college level. All right. And your extracurriculars can also be a way to fill kind of like the gap, right, that is left if you aren't providing your test scores, and to help make sure that the other pieces of the pie like really speak favorably to you. So really look for those leadership activities. How did you like give back to the programs that you were involved in? Maybe how did you grow with some of the clubs or teams that you started with? So perhaps freshman year, you were just a member of a club. Sophomore year, you found an opportunity to like be more involved and lead certain events. And then maybe as a junior, you took on a leadership role. What are some of the things that you learned in those situations? How did you collaborate with others? Those are also other ways that you can kind of highlight to the school, I'm going to be successful here because I've been able to do all of this stuff and figure this kind of out on my own, or ask for help when it was needed. And this impact piece is really, really valuable too. Like if you can show how you really contributed to a program or changed it, or maybe did something that your school had never done before and allowed, you know, other students to contribute in different ways that hadn't been possible before, those kinds of things can really show, okay, this person can really be successful in college and in the real world. And that's something that's important to schools as they review your application packet. All right, letters of recommendation can be super powerful. You really want to make sure that you are using those. So what does that mean? That means that when you put together when you're ready to ask your teachers for a recommendation, that you've thought like pretty strategically about who you're going to actually ask. And I always recommend, if you are, you know, a freshman, a sophomore even, like start building those relationships with your teachers. You don't want to come up to someone your, you know, junior year of high school and ask the teacher who you've maybe interacted with like twice and to write you a letter of recommendation. It's just not going to have as many examples and as much of the detail as it would if you had built that relationship over time, or really like tried to meet with them more on a personal level, like one-on-one, allowing them to get to know you and you them. That being said, even when you have developed those relationships, you're always going to want to give your recommenders as much context and guidance as possible, like explaining to them what your goals are, what schools you're interested in attending, why, what your maybe academic and career goals might be, and then even kind of highlighting to them some of the examples that you think might be valuable for them to share with the school. It's pretty easy to distinguish like an application or a recommendation letter that's very standard and like, okay, I'm just writing recommendation letters for any of the students that ask me, from one where the student has really actively been involved in the class, in outside work, has taken the time to get to know the teacher, has taken time maybe to support the teacher in certain work. Very easy to kind of tell the difference in that sense, that like a really strong application letter will have really good examples to bring to life character, abilities, the things that that student has accomplished. And then finally, your essays are, you know, these are the other components of your application pie, right? And if you're not submitting your test scores, you want to make sure that the other pieces are extra strong. Your essays, you want to write them in a way that is very genuine, that truly reflects your personality, your experiences, your goals, etc. And you want to be super specific, showing, not telling, right? So you don't want to say, I'm super resilient. You're going to want to show that through storytelling and giving really specific examples that the reader can relate to, or at the very least, like they can understand exactly what you're trying to tell them in the situations that you've been through. All right. Also, community engagement. This is like very related to things like your extracurricular. Some of this will be in volunteer work. You want to show where you've been involved. Impact, 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 right? So it's not just, I'm a member of X club. What did you do for X club? What did you do for the community? How many people did you serve? What did you change? Did you, what were kind of the results of your work, right? Because we don't want to just be working with no output. We want to be working and show that our work results in something. Similarly, civic engagement, if you've been very active in local initiatives, activism, service projects, you want to talk to those and really show how you've changed whatever happened, how it wouldn't have happened without you. And obviously, you know, these are high school students. We don't expect you to be, you know, 30-year-olds with like tons of experience or anything like that. But to the best of your ability, you know, everybody can make a small difference, and you want to be able to highlight that. Special talents also can be very memorable on your application packet and can help the admissions committee to kind of fill in a gap in their pool of, okay, this is like the class that we're trying to form, and we want to have people that are, you know, skilled in X and skilled in Y. So you definitely want to show off any special skills that you might have, whether those are performances or artwork or research that you've done, any like honors, any ways that you've been recognized. And, you know, do bring clarity to those, right? So if you were given a, you know, ABC Leadership Award, clarify, like, this award is given to like 1 out of 500 students every year selected by their like peers and teachers, right? You want to explain what the context of that is. Work experiences and internships, it can be very challenging to find meaningful work experiences and internships at a young age, but it's something that's definitely worth exploring because it can be a really good example of your ability to succeed in the workplace. Excuse me. And that's what one of the big things that they're looking for, and kind of one of the reasons the SAT and the ACT are even used, right? They're signals that you can be successful. Work experiences, internships are also signals that you can be successful. If you've been able to get an internship in an area that's of interest to you that you might want to pursue long-term, that's just showing to the admissions committee, hey, I want to do this long-term, and look, I've already done it. I know what it means. I'm not just making this up. Like, I've been involved. I've sought out these things. Even just the fact that you were able to get that internship can be a really good reflection of like your perseverance. Excuse me. So next topic will be differences between test optional and test blind colleges. So in a test blind situation, they will not use your standardized test scores. Like, don't submit them. They're just looking at the other components. A test optional school will consider them if you do submit them, and they will not think about them if you don't. So you're not punished, you're not at a disadvantage, but if you do submit them, they'll take a look at them and kind of figure out what piece of your application, what role they play in your application. And that is about it. And happy to take any questions. Let's see. Andrea, do you want to see if your volume is working? Well, I will do my best here. I think some of these got answered. Feel free to add others to the Q&A. So just a reminder, this will be shared afterwards, so you'll be able to reference the presentation. I see a question here from Elise. What is a good way to research the role of test scores in admissions at a target school? And yeah, I see Andrea has answered this. This is definitely like a great thing to do. The counselors have just like a lot of experience and like really see like the behind the scenes. So they'll be able to really provide good context around each school and what's critical to that school and maybe some of the things that that school is like really paying attention to. You can also, start by looking at the schools and what they're posting online, particularly right now as there's so much discussion about testing. They'll all have probably taken some kind of, clear stance on their position and what they're going to be doing. Vilma, would taking dual enrollment classes help boost your academic achievements? So feel free to clarify what you mean by dual enrollment. We can come back to that question. I can make an assumption, but I don't want to go in the wrong direction. Why did some colleges and universities go back to test required policies? Yeah, that's a good question. there's just a lot of research being done in this space in terms of what kind of the role of test scores play in a student's ability to succeed at school, and also related to fairness and how test scores are correlated to other factors. So I think some of these schools are doing some, like each of the schools is doing research and referencing research that's done at a broader industry level. I believe some of the schools that have shared this will have like a little brief on why they've decided to go back to test required. But I think ultimately, like, their position on it is that it helps to increase fairness. So I think what we'll see is over the next couple of years, just a little bit of fluidity around like whether schools remain test optional or go to test required or go from test required to test optional. They're just experimenting. It's kind of like an unusual time right after the pandemic. We're seeing kind of the first generation of students who were impacted like in certain time periods of their careers by the pandemic, and now kind of getting to the point where most students in high school maybe were impacted more in middle school. So I think they're just kind of trying to see how things go as the situation evolves. Okay, taking college course, that's what I thought, but just wanted to make sure. Right. So, would it help to boost your academic achievements? Yes, absolutely. Taking college courses while in high school is a great way to show that you're show your strength academically, that you're trying to take hard courses, that you'd be able to succeed in a college environment. Obviously, like, kind of depends on what those classes are and all of the details, but overall, taking college level classes is certainly something that can be helpful to highlight your academic achievements. Okay, are there any other questions? Oh, sorry. Begin in the Q&A here. I'm not seeing any others, but certainly, yeah, feel free to reach out. As Andrea mentioned, like, you can book a free consultation if there's a specific question you want to touch base on. Oh, sorry, I do see this one about an AP test, a 3 on an AP test. I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna hold on that one. I think best to ask a counselor or take a look too at how AP test scores are submitted, if they all go together or not, because I actually, I'm not sure if you can like choose which one goes and which one doesn't, if you've taken like a bunch of them. So I just don't want to give you the wrong answer on that one. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time, and hope that gave you a little bit of perspective into some of this discussion on like test optional and test blind. And wishing you all the best in the high school journey, and as you explore the school where you might continue your educational path. And definitely, yeah, feel free to reach out and check out the resources that are available through Quad as well.